Hello, hello. I hope you all had a wonderful new year. Today's video is a follow-up video on one I recently did named .NET 6 Blazor WebAssembly Multiple HTTP Clients. Let's quickly recap the problem statement and use this diagram. So I have multiple Blazor WebAssembly applications, these circles, and their reusable components live in a Razor class library. So each domain has one. These reusable components do HTTP calls to their API. And the problem was, for example, this application, Leisure SPA, implements both this Razor class library and that Razor class library. They both have a configuration for the HTTP client, but a unique configuration. This configuration has the base address set to the URL of the petadopt API, and that Razor class library's HTTP client configuration has its base address set to the PetSocial API. And the same goes for the utils. Razor class library has its base address set to the utils API URL. So what happened if you would normally use the HTTP clients and reference all of these projects in this Blazor WebAssembly client? The configurations would override each other and you don't have any control over which base address is used. So it's possible that a call needs to happen to the PetSocial API, but configuration of the petadopt shared SPA overrides all the other HTTP clients, so that wouldn't work. And that's exactly what we solved in previous video, but now we encountered another problem, and that is authorizing your HTTP requests. The way we set it up in the previous video didn't make that easy, so let's fix that. Let's go to the code. As you see, the project setup is similar. You have this utils with the shared SPA, the petadopt with its shared SPA, and the PetSocial with its shared SPA. If we take a look at the PetSocial SPA, so the Blazor WebAssembly client, and we go to the program CS, program class, and there we see we're adding the shared SPA, the utils shared SPA, and the PetSocial shared SPA each contain, at least the bottom two, contain a HTTP client configuration. Let's take a look at the PetSocial shared SPA configuration in the configure services, and there you see services.add_HTTP client, and then we used the typed client, a class a custom class we made, gave it a name, and set its base address. This is sufficient to solve the problem of the previous video, but not for our current problem. If we take a look at how this is used, so this is basically just injecting the HTTP client and exposing a property containing that client. And then in a service where we do the actual HTTP calls. Let's open one up. Oops, the ugliest one. Then we inject. So first off, we have a private read-only field, HTTP, which is then filled up with our custom HTTP client property. Well, so normally, so now I want to set a default header of the authorization header to my GWT token. So how you normally do that is let's go to a component which I'm in the pet shops. Let's just show it in the index page. Let's just go into another project for now, just to show how you would normally set the authorization header. So you would use the HTTP. We should inject it, of course. You would inject it like this on the component, and then set the default headers dot authorization equals a new authorization header with the key of bearer, and the token would be residing in my auth-tokens.access token. That would be the normal way to do this. And that would work, but not for our use case, not for how we implemented the named/typed client, HTTP client. So we're kind of adding a authorization header to our existing HTTP client on the fly, so to say. But if we look here, we inject, yeah, it's kind of, yeah, we're using this HTTP client. So then the question is, do we set this authorization header on this client? So like this, but of course, inject it on the component like we just did, and then do the same, but here, I set it on this class. That didn't seem to work. And trust me, I've been trying for hours and hours and hours to make that work. So of course you wouldn't do it here, but in the component, instead of this HTTP, you would then inject a, but yeah, what it should be the social HTTP client. Not gonna do it, but not gonna do it, but and then this would be client like that. But that doesn't work either. Just undo all of that. So it's quite tricky. So first of all, on which HTTP client do you set it? Yeah, that's already a tricky to answer. I would assume on this one, the custom one. But then that can't really work since you're injecting it on application startup. So to set that token on the fly seems not possible. But we might have been using it wrong all along. So instead of combining this instead of combining this typed client and named client, which probably isn't how it's meant to be. It's some kind of hack. Instead of doing that, we are going to do it differently. I already did it in my other project, in the adopt project. In the shared SPA, we first add our custom HTTP client as scoped, and then we add a named client. If we take a look at the custom client, instead of injecting the HTTP client, we inject the HTTP client factory, and we do this create client. If you have seen the previous video, it's also possible, of course, to, instead of, let's say, let's go to the social service again. Instead of injecting the SPAT social HTTP client, you could have here injected the HTTP client factory, and instead of that, you could have done create client with the name. But I didn't want to do that. It might have been the way to go after all, but let's encapsulate it in our custom HTTP client. So we do it like that. I'm actually going to just make this less. Just gonna make it like this. And this class we can then have a method set auth header, which sets the authorization default header. Basically just setting the header in this client property. So back to our configure services. Let's also rename this one, name of. Now we could probably move this specification in our custom class. I think, I hope. Let's say, then this backend config, of course, we can't access that yet. So we could set it up like this with the iOptions config and set the base address to config.this property. Probably have to then bind this backend configuration. That would look as follows. Backend config. Let's see. I think so. Yep. Should be good. In the meantime, I still run my project. And if we test this out, let's do a call that needs authorization. So here I'm logging the access token. So that means I'm logged in, of course. And this page has set the authorization header, should set the authorization header. Let's take a look at that. Component animal detail. And here I've been experimenting. So what happens when my auth state changed, I handle it, and if the user is logged in, I log the access token, which you shouldn't do, but it's for debug purposes. And then I was experimenting with the different HTTP clients, so the default one, the out of the box one, or my custom one. And now we could do some more testing. I could show you that it might not work with the default one, but it does work with the custom one. So we're doing it like this, but actually we could just set the auth header now, whatever method you choose. And then where I am requiring the authorization is for this call. It can only be done by an administrator. If you check out the API endpoint, you'll see it has the authorize attribute with the role of administrator. But for that, I need authorized requests. Anyway, so I logged in the animal detail the access token, and I should have set it to the HTTP client's default authorization header. If I now click the spotlight button, spotlight should create a spotlight, and I log the bearer token again. I mean the authorization header that has been set. So where is this logged again? Okay, it's actually logged on this service. Let's go to the in here, create spotlight requests, and we are checking whether it was set correctly. So that's the log you're seeing. So the request has been authorized successfully, and with our custom HTTP named client. So that was just to show you that it works. Let's now see if the other one would work, like the default HTTP client. Let's comment out the other one. This HTTP is, let's look at the top, is the default HTTP client. Let's rebuild and rerun the project. And normally this time the requests we should see an error status that we couldn't. Let's see. So we're logging the access token and the animal detail, which is fine. But now the regular HTTP client does not have the access token or the authorization header, although we did set it. Let's see. So we did set it, but of course, in this service, we are not using the default one, we are using the named client. So that's why it's, yeah, that's why it's not working. I hope it's somewhat clear. This is a very, very specific situation, like I showed you on my setup. If you just have a single application or two separate applications, don't bother doing all this work. Last thing I wanted to check with you is first off, if we add this custom HTTP client as scoped, and we want to inject the HTTP client factory, we need to have registered added the HTTP client. This makes the HTTP client factory available to use. So it's kind of strange that you couldn't just do this. Let's see, maybe even without the name. Let's just try it. I don't think it works. And I think another way to write this is at scoped SP service provider get service or get required service, and it would be by HTTP client factory, and then you could do create client. Yeah, that's for a named client. Yeah, well, you need, but somehow need to make this available to client factory for the HTTP client. I'm not going to dive too deep in that. Let's just try this one out. And if you try this, you get an HTTP client error about that HTTP client factory, or yeah, so the constructor of but our custom HTTP client, which has the client factory, so that doesn't work. Let's see if we can do this. Shouldn't work either. Just gonna give us the same thing, I think. Let's see what that gives. About the same error. So let's just keep it like that for now. Maybe I'll find a way to optimize this. Do it in one, yeah, whatever. Feel free to let me know if you know a better way to crack this case. Let's do a final test with a project that actually implements multiple HTTP clients. So let's see if it works with multiple. Yeah, okay. I'm not logged in on this application. I don't have the authorization yet. Authentication function that has the implement both HTTP clients or multiple HTTP clients and has the authentication stuff. Let's see. So I did log in the hidden login form. And now we should go to find a dog. Let's see. Let's go to one we know has dogs. And let's take this cutie. Okay, so now we see these buttons. We also see the access token logged. And if we click this, didn't work. Okay, I forgot I put this in comment, so that can't work. Okay, let's undo that for a second. This is probably not the final implementation, but just to make it work. And let's run a project that actually implements multiple HTTP clients and has a possibility to authenticate. Let's see if yes, I'm logged in. Let's go to a shelter which has some dogs, and the access token is logged, and these buttons are visible, which means I'm logged in, and the access token was logged correctly. So we didn't have an unauthorized error, so that's great. Let's look. This one should be, yeah, whatever. And this one should say now that it's already enjoying the spotlight. So that means everything worked fine. That's all for this video. I'll say it again, this is a very, maybe an uncommon scenario, but it's my scenario, so I had to figure out a way to authorize my requests. So actually to have a unique configuration for each HTTP client and be able to set their authorization headers. Ciao. I forgot to mention one more last thing. There is also a way to define a request middleware with these HTTP message handlers, delegation handlers, if I'm not mistaken, which would make it possible to set authorization headers before the send async was called. I did try that. First of all, then we should not have this line. I did try it. So that would be something like services.addScoped, and then your request middleware, your custom one. That would contain that would implement the delegation handler. Let's quickly show you. Just gonna make a class request middleware. Should name this a bit more specific, and that would implement delegation handler and then the send async. Send async override method, and that would work. And then you could say request dot headers dot authorization equals, and then now you of course you need to be okay, this, and then there, and then your access token. But now, where does this access token come from? In our case, from our authorization service, authentication service. And then we have to inject this, which adds another a bit more complexity. And this would be, in our case, ISP auth service injected, and then we could access auth service dot auth tokens dot access token. This would be a very elegant way to do that. And then let's forget about this right now. You could do HTTP message handler and have your request middleware. But this this didn't seem to work for my use case, at least not with my custom HTTP client. Somehow the request didn't go through. It just blocked, and yeah, it did not work for me. So yeah, this would be the way to use middleware and set some headers or something else before the send async is actually called. This send async is called when normally when you do something like put JSON as JSON async or get async or post async and all those stuff. That said, I could definitely learn some more about these, about how to optimally use these service collections. But definitely let me know if you know a better way to handle these scenarios. See you in the next video.